There are certain questions that hum in the background of human consciousness. Questions that we have carried with us since we first looked up at the stars and wondered what they were, or stared into a fire and saw shapes in the flames. Who are we? Where did we come from? Are we alone? These are the great, defining mysteries of our existence. But then there are other questions, smaller, stranger, and in some ways even more maddening. They are not about the vastness of the cosmos, but about the very specific creations of a single human mind. They are puzzles left behind for us, locked boxes with no visible keyhole, messages written in a language that seems to have been born and died with its author. Tonight, we are not just going to look at one of these puzzles. We are going to become consumed by it. We are going to talk about a book. And I know what you're thinking. A book? In an age of quantum computing and space exploration, what mystery can a simple, bound object of paper and ink possibly hold? But you must understand, this is not just any book. This is the book, the Everest of unsolved mysteries, the holy grail for cryptographers, historians, and anyone who has ever felt the pull of the truly unknown. Imagine, just for a moment, that you are in the Voynich Rare Book and Manuscript Library at Yale University. It's a modern architectural marvel, a giant, windowless marble cube designed to protect its priceless contents from the ravages of direct sunlight. Inside, it feels like a cathedral dedicated to the written word. In the center, a glass tower rises through the floors, filled with an impossible collection of humanity's most important texts. And somewhere in that collection, under carefully controlled conditions, lies our subject. Let's pretend they let you hold it. The curators, for some reason, trust you. They place it in your gloved hands. The first thing you notice is the size. It's unassuming, not a giant grimoire from a fantasy film. The small, intimate, about 9 inches tall and 6 inches wide. The kind of book you could carry with you. The cover is a mystery in itself. It's just a plain, flexible sheet of vellum, a pale parchment that has the color of old bone. It's smooth, almost waxy to the touch, and it whispers of immense age. There is no title, no author, no mark of any kind to tell you what lies within. It is a blank slate. You open it. The sound is a dry, delicate crackle. The sound of 6 centuries of silence being broken. The smell hits you, then the faint, dusty, organic scent of old parchment and faded ink. It smells like a forgotten corner of history. And then you see them. The pages. Around 240 of them remain, though it's clear from the numbering that some are missing, lost to time like forgotten memories. And every single one of these pages is a profound, baffling enigma. Your eyes are first drawn to the text. It flows across the page in a graceful, confident hand. It's not the cramped, spiky script of a medieval monk. It's elegant, almost calligraphic, with loops and flourishes. It looks like a real language. The words are separated by spaces. The text is arranged into paragraphs. Some characters look vaguely familiar, a distorted number 4, something that looks like an O with a tail, a character that resembles the number 9. But they are combined in ways that defy all logic. Other characters are completely alien. Intricate symbols that look like tiny, elegant gallows, or strange, multi-part figures that have no equivalent in any alphabet known to man. You are staring at a perfect, impenetrable wall of meaning. Then your gaze drifts to the illustrations. And this is where the mystery deepens from a linguistic puzzle to a full-blown dive into the surreal. On the left page, there is a drawing of a plant. It's colored with simple, mineral-based paints, muted greens, blues, and reds. But the plant itself, it's a biological absurdity. It has the serrated leaves of a nettle, but they grow from a thick, blue, segmented stalk. And the root isn't a tangle of fibers. It's a pale, fleshy, bulbous thing that looks disturbingly like a human heart, complete with what look like arteries and veins snaking into the soil. The text curls around it, as if describing its properties. You turn the page, your breath caught in your throat. Another plant. This one has a flower with vibrant red petals arranged like a pinwheel, and at its center, where the pistil and stamen should be, there is a single, detailed, unblinking human eye. You feel a chill run down your spine. This is not a botany textbook. This is something else. You keep turning. You find circular diagrams filled with stars, suns, and moons. But the constellations are not the ones you know. You see a diagram of what looks like the constellation Draco, the dragon, but its body is made of tiny, naked women holding stars. You see charts that look like roadmaps of the heavens, with paths connecting celestial bodies that have human faces, some smiling, some grimacing. And then you reach the most infamous section of the book. Page after page after page filled with small, naked female figures. They are not drawn with erotic intent. They feel more biological or symbolic. They are shown bathing and frolicking in pools and tubs filled with a strange, viscous green or blue liquid. But these are not swimming pools. They are bizarre, organic-looking structures connected by a nightmarish labyrinth of pipes and tubes. One page shows women sliding down a chute from a green cloud into a pool shaped like a flower. Another shows a series of interconnected pods, like a giant bunch of grapes, each containing a woman. They seem to be part of a vast, incomprehensible hydraulic system. Some of them wear crowns. Some appear pregnant. All of them have blank, serene expressions. It's like looking at a technical manual for a process you can't begin to imagine, part alchemy, part biology, part surrealist dream. What is this book? Is it the secret diary of an alchemist, detailing experiments too dangerous to write in plain language? Is it the sacred scripture of a long-dead cult that worshipped plants and stars? Is it a work of fiction, a guide to a fantasy world created by a mind 600 years ahead of its time? Is it an encyclopedia from another dimension that somehow fell through into ours? Or is it the most elaborate, beautiful, and successful hoax ever perpetrated? This is the riddle of the Voynich Manuscript. For over a century, it has been a siren song for the world's greatest minds, and it has dashed them all against the rocks of its own beautiful nonsense. It has humbled brilliant codebreakers who unraveled the communications of entire nations. It has stumped historians who can reconstruct the daily lives of medieval peasants from a handful of tax records. It has defied the most powerful artificial intelligence we can create. It is a locked room mystery where the room is a book, the victim is meaning itself, and the trail of clues leads everywhere and nowhere at once. This isn't just a story about unsolved codes or strange ancient texts. This is a story about a confrontation with the absolute limit of what we can know. It is a ghost on the library shelf, a void in our shared history. And tonight, we are going to walk right up to the edge of that void and stare into it. The modern chapter of this story begins not in a dusty archive, but in the life of a man who was, himself, a character worthy of a mystery novel. Wilfred Voynich. Born Michael Habdank Wojniaks in Poland in 1865, he was a man forged in the fires of political turmoil. As a young man, he was a revolutionary, a nationalist fighting against the oppressive rule of the Russian Tsar. He was arrested, imprisoned in Warsaw, and eventually exiled to a hard labor camp in Siberia. But Voynich was not a man to be caged. In a daring escape, he journeyed across Russia and Persia, eventually making his way to London, where he reinvented himself. The revolutionary became a connoisseur, the political prisoner an antiquarian book dealer. Voynich had an uncanny eye for treasure and a flair for the dramatic. He built a reputation for unearthing forgotten gems from the libraries and monasteries of Europe. And it was on one of these book-hunting expeditions in 1912 that he made the discovery that would define his legacy. According to his own account, and it's important to remember, Voynich was a born storyteller. He was at the Villa Mondragone, a Jesuit college near Rome, a grand estate with a long and storied history. He described being led to a collection of old chests, filled with manuscripts the college was looking to sell, hoping to raise funds for renovations. He spent days sifting through them, and then he found it. He said he knew in an instant that it was different. It wasn't just old. It was strange. The smooth, blank cover, the elegant, alien script, the impossible botany, the bizarre bathing rituals. It was a book that seemed to operate by its own private set of rules. He purchased it, along with a number of other manuscripts, and the book that would one day bear his name re-emerged into the light of the 20th century, ready to begin its new life as an object of intense, obsessive fascination. But the book's journey did not begin with Voynich. Tucked within its pages was a tantalizing clue, a letter that served as a bridge to its even more mysterious past. The letter was dated 1665 or 1666 and was written by a man named Johannes Marcus Marci, a prominent Bohemian doctor, scientist, and at the time, the rector of Charles University in Prague. The letter was addressed to one of the intellectual superstars of the 17th century, a German Jesuit scholar in Rome named Athanasius Kircher. To understand why Marci sent the book to Kircher, you have to understand who Kircher was. He was a true Renaissance man born a little too late. They called him the master of 100 arts. Kircher was a polymath of staggering ambition. He built musical fountains and magnetic clocks. He designed a cat piano, which we probably shouldn't think about too hard. He descended into the crater of Vesuvius to study it, and he established one of the first public museums of curiosities in Rome. Most importantly for our story, he had a reputation as a master decoder. He had published a massive work on the Egyptian language and claimed to have deciphered hieroglyphs. Now, we know today that his translations were almost entirely wrong products of wild, imaginative guesswork rather than real linguistic analysis. But in the 1660s, his reputation was immense. If there was an unbreakable code, a mysterious text, Athanasius Kircher was the man you sent it to. Marci's letter is our primary source for the manuscript's early history, and it is a fascinating document. In it, Marci explains that the book had been given to him by a close friend, an alchemist who had inherited it. But before that, he writes, the book belonged to a figure of immense power and legendary eccentricity, the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II. This is where the story gets really good. Rudolph II, who reigned from Prague in the late 16th and early 17th centuries, was not your typical monarch concerned with taxes and treaties. He was a recluse, a melancholic, and a passionate obsessive. He turned Prague into the occult capital of Europe. His court was a bizarre and brilliant mix of the era's greatest scientists and its most notorious mystics. On one hand, you had the groundbreaking astronomers Tycho Brahe and Johannes Kepler, mapping the heavens and laying the groundwork for modern physics. On the other, you had alchemists in their laboratories trying to turn lead into gold, and mystics who claimed to speak with angels. Rudolph was obsessed with collecting. He created one of the world's most famous cabinets of wonders, or Kunstkammer. This wasn't a museum in the modern sense. It was a microcosm of the entire world, a collection designed to reflect the divine order of the universe. It contained priceless paintings, exotic animal specimens, intricate clockwork automata, and, most importantly, rare and magical books. He was a man desperately searching for hidden knowledge, for the key to unlocking the secrets of God and nature. And according to Marci's letter, Rudolph II encountered the Voynich Manuscript and was utterly captivated. He believed it held profound secrets. The letter states that the emperor bought the book for the staggering sum of 600 gold ducats. It is difficult to overstate how much money this was. It was a fortune. A skilled craftsman might earn 20 or 30 ducats in a year. 600 ducats could buy a small castle. It's a sum that suggests Rudolph didn't just think the book was curious. He believed it was priceless, a genuine key to some lost, powerful knowledge. And who did Rudolph supposedly believe wrote this book? The letter claims Rudolph was told it was the work of Roger Bacon. Bacon was a 13th century English friar and philosopher, a man so far ahead of his time that he earned the nickname Dr. Mirabilis, the miraculous doctor. He wrote about the possibility of flying machines, self-propelled carriages, and telescopes centuries before they were invented. He was a pioneer of the scientific method, but his work was so advanced and his interest in alchemy and astrology so deep that he was constantly accused of practicing black magic. For a mystery-obsessed ruler like Rudolph, a secret book by the legendary Roger Bacon would have been the ultimate prize. The letter adds one more tantalizing name to the chain of ownership. Marcy mentions a rumor that the man who sold the book to Rudolph was none other than John Dee. If that name sends a shiver down your spine, it should. John Dee was one of the most brilliant and strange figures of the Elizabethan age. A mathematical genius, a master navigator, he was Queen Elizabeth I's trusted advisor and court astrologer. But as he grew older, Dee became obsessed with a different kind of knowledge. He sought direct contact with the divine. He teamed up with a dubious character named Edward Kelly, a convicted forger who claimed to be a powerful spirit medium. Together, in darkened rooms across Europe, Dee and Kelly would conduct scrying sessions. Kelly would gaze into a crystal ball or a polished obsidian Marora shoe stone and claim to receive messages directly from the angels of God. Dee, the meticulous scholar, would sit at a table and furiously transcribe everything Kelly said. The result was a series of detailed diaries and a complex, supposedly angelic language they called Enochian, complete with its own unique alphabet and grammar. The idea that John Dee, a man who co-created one of the most famous artificial mystical languages in history, might have once owned another book written in an unreadable mystical script, it's a confluence of high strangeness that is almost too perfect to be true. Did Dee and Kelly fake the manuscript to sell to the gullible emperor? Or did they find it and, unable to crack it themselves, pass it on? It adds an unforgettable layer of occult glamour to the manuscript story. So, following the trail from Roger Bacon, maybe, to John Dee possibly, to Emperor Rudolph II, then to an unknown alchemist, and finally to Johannes Marcus Marcy. Marcy, admitting defeat, sends it to Athanasius Kircher in Rome with a plea. For such sphinxes as these, their Oedipus you alone are. He was challenging Kircher to be the hero who solves the riddle. But the great Kircher, the master of 100 arts, failed. He never published a translation. He never claimed to have solved it. As far as we know, the Sphinx defeated Oedipus. After Kircher's death, the manuscript was absorbed into the vast Jesuit archives, where it seems to have been filed away and forgotten. For more than 200 years, it slept, a silent enigma on a dusty shelf, until the charismatic revolutionary and book dealer Wilfrid Voynich walked through the door and woke it from its slumber. For decades, this shadowy, rumor-filled history was all we had. But in the 21st century, science finally gave us a single, hard, indisputable fact. In 2009, researchers at the University of Arizona were given permission to perform radiocarbon dating on several tiny samples clipped from the vellum pages. The results were a bombshell. They established, with 95% certainty, that the vellum itself was made from an animal that lived sometime between the years 1404 and 1438. This one piece of data completely reshaped the mystery. First, it proved that the book could not have been written by Roger Bacon, who died over a century earlier. It also meant it could not have been owned by John Dee in its present form, although he could have owned an earlier source. Most importantly, it definitively proved that the book was not a forgery by Wilfrid Voynich himself, a theory that had been popular among skeptics for years. This was not a clever modern fake. It was a genuine artifact from the early 15th century. Later analysis of the ink and paints showed they were made from common, period-appropriate materials iron gall ink, and simple mineral and plant-based pigments. So we now know when it was made. It was created in the heart of the medieval period, a time of immense change and upheaval, the very dawn of the Italian Renaissance. But this knowledge only makes the contents more baffling. Who, in early 15th century Europe, was creating a book filled with such profoundly weird and seemingly modern surrealist imagery? This discovery didn't solve the mystery. It anchored it in reality, making the enigma even deeper and more profound. This wasn't just a strange story. It was a strange history. So now we have the object in our hands, and we know its history is as labyrinthine as its contents. Let's do what centuries of scholars have done. Let's try to make sense of the impossible. Let's take a guided tour through the strange world of the Voynich Manuscript, section by section. We begin, as the book does, in the herbal section. This is the largest portion of the manuscript, making up almost the first half. Page after page is dedicated to botany, or at least something that looks like it. Each page typically features a large, detailed illustration of a single plant, accompanied by paragraphs of that confounding script. One assumes the text describes the plant, its name, its properties, how to prepare its standard format for a medieval herbal. Medieval herbals were intensely practical books. They were the medical textbooks of their day, guides for physicians, apothecaries, and folk healers. They described real plants with real medicinal uses. But the Voynich herbal is a field guide to a world that does not exist. The plants are chimeras, biological fantasies pieced together from parts that have no business being on the same organism. Let's look at a few specific examples. On folio 16V, there's a plant that has a root system resembling a string of ginger, but from it grows a single, thick stalk that branches into two symmetrical arms, almost like a candelabra. From these arms sprout leaves that look exactly like the feathery fronds of a fern. And at the top of each arm is a flower that looks like a blue, six-petaled lily. It's elegant, it's beautifully drawn, and it is a biological impossibility. Turn to folio 33V. Here you see a plant that looks almost like a common weed, with simple green leaves. But its root is a horrifying spectacle. It's a dense, tangled mass of what look like pale, blind worms or serpents, all writhing together in the earth. The text next to it is long and detailed. What could it possibly be saying? Caution! Root may squirm when harvested? For a century, botanists have been driven to distraction by this section. The most pressing question is, are these real plants that we just can't identify? Could they be extinct species? Or perhaps plants from a part of the world unknown to 15th century Europeans like the Americas? The problem is that while some elements are recognizable, the whole is always wrong. Some have claimed the prevailing theory is that these plants are fantasies. But if so, why? And why are they presented with such scientific, systematic rigor? It's not a sketchbook of doodles. It's organized like a formal encyclopedia. It has led to a fascinating hypothesis related to a medieval concept called the doctrine of signatures. This was the belief that God had marked plants with a signature to indicate their use. A plant with heart-shaped leaves was good for the heart. A plant with a root that looked like a scorpion was an antidote for a scorpion sting. What if the Voynich plants are not meant to be taken literally but symbolically? What if that plant with the heart-like root is not for a physical heart condition, but for a spiritual one like heartbreak or a lack of courage? It would mean the herbal section isn't about medicine, but about a kind of spiritual alchemy. A compelling idea, but like everything else, impossible to prove. From the world of impossible plants, we move to the heavens. The next major section is generally called the astronomical or astrological section. This part consists of intricate circular diagrams, or mandalas, filled with celestial imagery. There are concentric rings containing stars, moons, and suns. Many of these celestial bodies have expressive human faces. Some are placid. Some look surprised. Some are weeping. You'll find pages dedicated to the zodiac, but it's a zodiac with a twist. The familiar symbols are there: a bull for Taurus, two figures for Gemini, a crab for Cancer, but they are often depicted in strange ways. The archer for Sagittarius might be a centaur, but he's aiming his bow at nothing, standing inside a strange tub-like structure. And alongside the familiar 12 signs, there are other, unidentifiable constellations, represented by bizarre symbols or groups of figures. One of the most striking features of this section is the presence of those odd tubes and pipes we saw in the bathing section. On some pages, suns and moons are connected by delicate, arching conduits, as if some ethereal fluid is flowing between them. It's a vision of the cosmos not as a grand, clockwork machine, but as a living, hydraulic organism. What are these charts for? Are they calendars? The manuscript does contain a page that seems to be a calendar, with a 365-day cycle broken down into months, but the details are, as always, opaque. Are they horoscopes? Or are they something more abstract? Maps of a spiritual journey through different celestial realms? Or perhaps not maps of outer space, but inner space? Some researchers have suggested these are not astronomical charts at all, but microscopic ones, diagrams of cells or biological processes as seen through some lost, early form of microscope. It's a wild theory, but given the rest of the book, it's hard to rule anything out completely. And this brings us to the section that is, without a doubt, the most bizarre, the most famous, and the most uniquely Voynichian part of the entire book. It's the section that has no known parallel in the entire history of manuscript illumination. This is the balneological section, a word you don't hear often. It simply means related to the study of bathing. Here, the text takes a back seat to the illustrations. Page after page is a bewildering panorama of small, simply drawn naked women, often called nymphs. They have rounded bellies, elaborate hairstyles reminiscent of the early 15th century, and utterly blank expressions. And they are all immersed in a thick, green or blue liquid that fills an interconnected network of pools, tubs, channels, and pipes. The sheer surrealism of these pages is breathtaking. The structures the women inhabit defy logic and physics. On one page, a series of tubs that look like giant, hollowed-out seed pods are linked together by a plumbing system that resembles a human digestive tract. Women float placidly in each pod. On another page, a massive, crown-like structure serves as a fountain, with the green liquid cascading down into pools where dozens of women are gathered. They hold strange objects. They gesture to one another. They seem to be engaged in some kind of communal, ritualistic activity whose purpose is a total mystery. The imagery is so specific and so strange that it begs for an allegorical interpretation. What does it all mean? Is this a women's health manual? The potbellies have led many to speculate that it's about pregnancy, childbirth, or gynecology. The tubs and pipes could be highly stylized, symbolic representations of the reproductive system or the flow of bodily humors according to medieval medicine. Or is it alchemical? Alchemy is rich with symbolism involving purification, dissolution, and rebirth, often depicted as a king and queen bathing together in a chemical wedding. Perhaps these women represent souls, or prima materia, being washed, purified, and transformed in the alchemical bath. The green liquid could be the aqua vitae, the water of life. Or is it something else entirely? A depiction of the fountain of youth? A guide to a real or legendary therapeutic spring? A scene from a forgotten mythology? The blankness of the women's faces is what makes it so unsettling. They are not individuals with personalities. They are a collective, like cells in a body or bees in a hive, all part of a single, incomprehensible process. These pages are a window into a belief system, a worldview, so alien to ours that we lack even the basic vocabulary to describe what we're seeing. After the baffling world of the nymphs, the manuscript takes another turn with what's known as the cosmological section. This section is dominated by several large, complex, circular diagrams that seem to be maps or schematics. The most famous of these is a spectacular 9-panel fold-out page, often called the Rosette's Folio. To see it, you have to physically unfold the page multiple times, revealing a sprawling map of 9 interconnected circular islands, or rosettes. They are linked by what look like causeways and, again, those ubiquitous pipes. Each rosette is unique. One at the top left seems to contain a volcano or a mountain. The large one in the center has a sun-like face. Another contains a detailed drawing of a castle or a walled city. Others are filled with intricate, abstract patterns that look like flowers or stars. Tiny figures and symbols are scattered across the entire map. It is a masterpiece of cartographic fantasy. But a map of what? Is it a literal map of a fictional land, an early exercise in world-building like something from Tolkien or Borges? Is it a spiritual map, a guide to a journey through different planes of existence or states of consciousness, like a Dante's Inferno for a religion we've never heard of? Or is it a conceptual map, a diagram of a philosophical system, with each rosette representing a different branch of knowledge? The Rosette's Folio is perhaps the most ambitious and intellectually dense part of the manuscript, and it is a complete and total cipher. Following this, we find a section that brings us slightly back down to earth, though not by much. This is the pharmaceutical section. Here, the format changes. The pages are lined with drawings of what are clearly apothecary jars and containers, the kind a medieval pharmacist would use to store herbs, minerals, and finished remedies. They are beautifully drawn and brightly colored. Next to each jar, there are small, detailed drawings of plant parts, individual leaves, roots, flowers. And these are, of course, the same impossible plants from the herbal section at the beginning of the book. The text is arranged in short, blocky paragraphs next to each item, looking for all the world like recipes or instructions. This section feels like the practical application of the knowledge from the first half of the book. The herbal section shows you the plants. This section tells you how to use them. It's a cookbook for a mystical pharmacy. Here's a pinch of the leaf from the eye-flower, a piece of the root from the serpent plant, ground up and stored in this specific jar. But recipes for what? Cures for diseases? Alchemical elixirs? Love potions? Poisons? Without being able to read a single word or identify a single ingredient, it is a tantalizing but ultimately useless collection of secrets. And finally, the book concludes with a long section of pure, unadulterated text. There are no more illustrations, just page after page of that dense, elegant, and maddeningly unreadable script. The text is organized into short paragraphs, each one marked in the margin by a small, star-like or flower-like symbol. This is often called the recipes or stars section, but that is pure speculation. This final section feels like the key to everything. It feels like the place where the author finally stops showing and starts telling, explaining the system, revealing the philosophy, and spelling out the secrets that the rest of the book only hints at through its strange imagery. And it is a solid, featureless, impenetrable wall of text. It is here that the full weight of the manuscript's challenge is felt. It is the final, silent taunt. Here is all the knowledge you seek. All you have to do is read it. And so, for over 100 years, that is what people have tried to do. This brings us to the great intellectual battlefield of the Voynich Manuscript, the arena where theories rise and fall, and where the world's most brilliant minds have charged at its walls, only to be thrown back, bruised, and defeated. The attempts to decipher it are a history of human ingenuity and human frustration. The most straightforward approach, and the first one everyone tries, is that the text is a cipher. It's a known language, likely one from 15th century Europe like Latin, Italian, or German, that has been deliberately obscured using a system of cryptography. The first, most basic type of cipher is a simple substitution cipher, where each Voynich symbol simply stands for one letter of a regular alphabet. Think of a kid's decoder ring. A equals X, B equals Q, and so on. This was tested early on and failed spectacularly. While the number of unique Voynich glyphs, around 20 to 30, is a good fit for a European alphabet, the statistical properties of the text are all wrong. For example, in English, the most common letter is Z. In Italian, it's A. You can analyze any text and find these telltale frequency patterns. But when you analyze the Voynich script, the letter frequencies don't match any known language. Furthermore, the structure of the words is deeply strange. Certain characters appear almost exclusively at the beginning of words. Others appear only at the end. Some characters are almost always found doubled up, like E or LL in English, forming distinct patterns like kokiti or sholshi. Others are never doubled. These strict, almost grammatical rules are one of the most language-like features of the text. The manuscript famously obeys something called Zipf's law, a statistical rule that governs word frequency in almost all human languages. This law states that the most common word in a text will appear about twice as often as the second most common, 3 times as often as the third, and so on. Random gibberish does not follow Zipf's law. The Voynich text does. This is a powerful piece of evidence that we are looking at something structured and meaningful, not just random scribbles. So if it's not a simple cipher, what about a more complex one? Perhaps a polyalphabetic cipher, like the famous Vigenère cipher, which uses a keyword to shift between several different substitution alphabets, making frequency analysis much harder. Or maybe it's not a cipher at all, but a code, where each Voynich word corresponds to a whole word or concept in a separate codebook. The problem is, to break these systems, you usually need a crib, a piece of the text where you know the meaning. And with the Voynich manuscript, we have no crib. We have nothing. The heavy artillery of 20th century codebreaking was brought to bear on this problem. During World War II, a team of elite U.S. Army cryptanalysts, led by the legendary William Friedman, took a crack at it. Friedman was a genius. He was the man who led the team that broke Japan's Purple Machine cipher, a feat that had a direct impact on the outcome of the war. He and his team studied the manuscript in their spare time as a kind of ultimate challenge. They spent years analyzing its statistical properties. Their final conclusion was a resounding nothing. They could not break it. Friedman himself came to believe it was not a cipher for a natural language, but an early attempt at a synthetic philosophical language. But he could never prove it. He couldn't extract a single word of meaning. The manuscript had defeated the man who broke purple. This unbroken record of failure has led many to embrace the second major theory. It's all a hoax. This is, in many ways, the most cynical and yet most compelling theory. The argument is simple. Someone in the early 15th century, a time rife with superstition and a burgeoning market for mystical artifacts, created this book for one purpose: to swindle a rich, gullible patron. The creator was a con artist of unparalleled genius. They understood enough about language to create a text that looked and felt real, a text that would mimic the statistical properties of language without actually possessing any meaning. They drew a bunch of fantastical plants and bizarre scenes to make the book look profound and mysterious. They aged the materials to make it look ancient, and then they sold it to the highest bidder. The target in this scenario would have been someone exactly like Emperor Rudolph II. The payoff of 600 gold ducats would certainly have been a powerful motivator. But could anyone really create such a sophisticated hoax? To write over 200 pages of consistent, rule-following, aesthetically pleasing gibberish would require a level of dedication and intellectual rigor that is almost unimaginable. It's arguably more difficult than simply writing a book in a real language and then encrypting it. Proponents of the hoax theory point to a few key pieces of evidence. One of the most significant is the lack of corrections in the text. When people write, they make mistakes. They cross things out, they erase, they rephrase. The Voynich script, however, flows across the page with an almost inhuman smoothness. It seems to have been written quickly and confidently, with very few errors. This could suggest that the author wasn't composing thoughts, but simply transcribing symbols according to a predetermined pattern or template, a process that would require less cognitive load and result in fewer mistakes. It's as if they were mindlessly copying from a meaningless key. This brings us to the more esoteric theories. What if it's not a code and not a hoax, but something else entirely? Theory number 3 is that it's a case of glossolalia, or speaking in tongues. The idea is that the author was a mystic, a visionary, perhaps a nun in a secluded convent, who entered a trance-like state and channeled this text and these images from a divine or spiritual source. The book would then be a deeply personal record of their own unique spiritual cosmology, never intended for anyone else to understand. It would not be a language in the conventional sense, but the direct, unmediated output of a subconscious mind in communication with what it perceived as the sacred. This would explain the strangeness, the internal consistency, as it's all from one mind, and why it's undecipherable. It isn't a puzzle to be solved. It's a piece of raw, visionary, outsider art. A related, more modern interpretation of this is that the author may have had a mental illness that caused them to create this elaborate private world. The human brain is more than capable of creating complex, rule-based systems that are logical to the creator but completely opaque to outsiders. This is a sadder, more clinical explanation, but it remains a possibility. Then we have theory number 4, the one favored by William Friedman. It's a synthetic or artificial language. The Renaissance was a time of great intellectual ferment, and there was a fascination with the idea of language itself. Scholars like John Dee and later John Wilkins experimented with creating new languages. Some sought a universal language that could overcome the curse of the Tower of Babel and unite all of humanity. Others sought a philosophical language, a perfectly logical system that could express concepts with mathematical precision, free from the ambiguity and messiness of natural human speech. Perhaps the Voynich Manuscript is the only surviving document of such a grand, ambitious project. Maybe a lone scholar or a small, secret society devoted years to creating a new language and a new system of knowledge, and this book is their encyclopedia. This theory neatly explains the text's rule-based structure and its language-like statistics. But it runs into a huge problem. An artificial language is useless without its dictionary and grammar guide. Why would someone go to the immense trouble of creating this masterpiece, only to leave behind no key for understanding it? Did the key exist and was it simply lost to time? It's a frustrating possibility. In the last decade, we have unleashed our most powerful new weapon on the manuscript: artificial intelligence. Researchers have fed high-resolution scans of every page into powerful machine learning algorithms. They've used AI to cluster the glyphs, to map the statistical relationships between words, and to search for hidden patterns that human cryptographers might have missed. The results have been a series of tantalizing false dawns. In 2018, a Canadian team used AI to analyze the text and claimed they had identified the language as a form of scrambled, abbreviated Hebrew. They even produced a translation of the opening sentence. She made recommendations to the priest, man of the house, and me and people. The news went viral. Had the mystery finally been solved? But other experts in both cryptography and medieval Hebrew quickly poured cold water on the claim. They argued that the researchers' methodology was flawed, allowing for so many possible substitutions and anagrams that one could find patterns of Hebrew in almost any sufficiently long text. Other AI studies have suggested the language might be related to Proto-Romance languages, or that some of the words for plants seem to have a basis in known languages from Central Asia. But every single one of these breakthroughs has so far failed to gain broad acceptance or be independently replicated. The AI can find patterns, but it cannot, on its own, leap from pattern to meaning. It's still just a very sophisticated statistical tool, and it seems the Voynich Manuscript is too sophisticated a puzzle. And so here we stand, at the culmination of a century of intense effort. We've thrown our best human minds and our most powerful thinking machines at this book, and it has yielded nothing. Not a single confirmed, verifiable word. The manuscript remains undefeated, a perfect enigma. So why? Why do we care so much? It's just one weird old book. But I think its power lies in what it represents. The Voynich Manuscript is a perfect symbol of the unknown. It is a tangible piece of our own human past that has, through some twist of fate, become as alien to us as a message from another star system. I want you to really think about the person who made this. Sometime around the year 1420, somewhere in Europe, a person sat down with a newly prepared stack of expensive calfskin vellum, a pot of iron gall ink, and a collection of simple paints. Who was this person? Were they a forgotten genius, a Leonardo da Vinci before Leonardo, documenting a whole new system of science and philosophy? Were they a woman, a brilliant herbalist or midwife whose knowledge was considered heretical or dangerous by the patriarchal society of her time, forcing her to invent a script that no man could read to protect herself and her secrets? Were they a jaded, cynical fraud, the greatest con artist of the Middle Ages, laughing up their sleeve as they meticulously crafted the world's most enduring intellectual prank? Were they a lonely soul, an outcast creating a rich inner world to which only they held the key? Were they the secretary of a secret society, the keeper of their sacred texts? Were they telling a story, recording a history, or praying to a god whose name is now lost to the wind? We cannot know. And that is what is so profoundly haunting. We can look at the pyramids and understand their purpose. We can analyze Roman pottery and reconstruct trade routes. We have a context, a framework, for almost everything our ancestors left behind. But the Voynich Manuscript has been torn from its context. It floats in history, a cultural ghost ship, untethered to any known port. It is a message in a bottle, written in a language whose entire civilization has vanished. It represents a total, catastrophic failure of communication across the centuries. All of that effort, all of that artistry, all of that knowledge, whatever it washes, reached us as a blank. A beautiful, intricate, and utterly silent void. It forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth, that our connection to the past is fragile. That knowledge can be lost, not just forgotten, but rendered permanently inaccessible. That some questions may not have answers. And maybe in our modern age, that is its true value. In a world where every fact seems to be just a Google search away, where we have mapped the human genome and photographed black holes, the Voynich Manuscript serves as a vital, humbling reminder that the universe still holds perfect, impenetrable secrets. It stands as a monument to the unknowable. It sits there on its climate-controlled shelf at Yale, and it waits. It has outlasted empires. It has watched generations of us be born and die. It has seen our technology evolve from the quill pen to the quantum computer. And through it all, it poses the same silent, unwavering question to us that it posed to Rudolf II and Athanasius Kircher. Can you understand me? And for 600 years, the unwavering answer from humanity has been no. So I want to pass that question on to you. I'm not asking for the solution, but for your theory, your feeling. What do you think the Voynich Manuscript is? Head down into the comments and let's turn this into a conversation. Are you Team Hoax, convinced it's the most brilliant con job in history? Are you Team Code, a believer that there is a real, decipherable message in there, just waiting for a modern-day Rosetta Stone or a moment of genius? Or do you lean towards the more esoteric explanations of visionaries' art, an alien artifact, a lost language? You don't have to be an expert to have an opinion on this. If you enjoy these deep dives into the black holes of history, into the stories that sit at the very edge of human understanding, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel and ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration. There are so many more locked rooms to investigate, so many more unsolved codes and strange ancient texts waiting in the shadows of our past. In the end, perhaps the purpose of the Voynich Manuscript is not to be read, but to make us wonder, to force us to use our own imaginations to fill the void it presents, to make us think about the nature of knowledge, the fragility of history, and the beautiful, terrible possibility that some secrets are meant to be kept forever. It is a book made not of words, but of questions. And for now, those questions are all we have. It remains silent, beautiful, and utterly, perfectly mysterious, waiting, perhaps for a mind that has not yet been born, or perhaps for no one at all.